Welcome to another deep dive. Today we're going to be exploring the fascinating world of, well, your own mind.
Oh, that sounds fun.
Yeah, I know, right? So we're taking excerpts from Daniel Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow.
Oh, yeah, great book.
Specifically those parts where he just kind of blows your mind with um, insights into cognitive biases and heuristics and how we make decisions, all that good stuff.
It's like, getting that backstage pass to how your mind works, all those hidden forces that shape our judgments and thoughts, and we don't even realize it most of the time.
Yeah, it's kind of scary, actually, when you think about it.
Yeah.
But are you ready to maybe uncover those mental quirks and maybe even outsmart them a little?
Absolutely.
All right, so we're going to take some really complex ideas and break them down into, well, hopefully bite-sized pieces so you can walk away with a deeper understanding of yourself, really.
I like it.
So one of the most, I guess, intriguing things that Kahneman presents is this idea that we actually have two systems of thinking going on out there, right?
That is.
Yeah, system one and system two. Okay, so think of it this way. System one is like that impulsive friend.
Yeah.
Right? They just react instantly without thinking things through.
Oh, I know that person.
So we all. It's automatic, effortless, fueled by emotion. Just imagine someone says the word vomit. Right?
Yeah.
Right. You don't stop and ponder the word vomit. Your stomach churns. It's instantaneous. That's system one in action.
That makes sense. What about those optical illusions, where two lines look like they're different lengths, but they're actually the same?
Yeah. That's system one, jumping to conclusions based on just, what it sees, even if it's wrong. And it's constantly working in the background, shaping our perceptions without us even knowing it.
That's kind of scary.
A little bit, yeah.
So what about this system two, then?
So system two is like, the thoughtful friend. They like to weigh all the options, before they make a move.
Right.
This is the system that helps you solve like a really tricky math problem or, resist that extra slice of cake when you're trying to, be healthy.
I need to work on that system.
It's deliberate, logical, it requires effort.
Yeah, I could see that.
So both systems are essential, obviously.
Yeah.
But as you can imagine, the interplay between these two can sometimes lead us down some surprising paths.
Yeah, I can definitely see that.
And this is where we get into those really fascinating concepts of cognitive biases and heuristics.
Okay, let's hear about those.
So these mental shortcuts or heuristics, right? That's system one's way of making these quick judgments, efficient, but they can backfire sometimes.
How so?
Well, they lead to those cognitive biases, and that can trip us up big time.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Can you give us some really specific examples?
Oh, yeah. Kahneman highlights some incredible examples that'll make you question everything you thought you knew about how you think.
Okay.
Like the Florida effect, for instance.
What's that?
So just hearing words related to old age, like Florida, bingo, can unconsciously make people walk slower.
Seriously. It's wild. It's these subtle cues that are influencing our actions without us even knowing it.
Wow.
Think about that next time you're walking through a store, right?
Okay.
That music they're playing, the arrangement of the products, it's all kind of nudging you potentially to buy certain things.
Yeah.
That's priming in action. Sneaky. Very sneaky.
So our environment can influence our choices without us even realizing it.
It's kind of crazy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about, what was it? Cognitive ease. I think you mentioned that one earlier.
Yeah. So cognitive ease, it's another bias that plays on that whole subconscious manipulation thing. So our brains, they're drawn to information that just feels fluent and familiar.
Okay.
If something's easy to read or recall, we're more likely to believe it's true.
Gotcha.
Even if it's not.
Oh, wow.
It's like our mind is saying, hey, this feels good, it must be right. But that's not always the case, right?
No, not at all.
Yeah.
So just because something's catchy or it's repeated often doesn't necessarily mean it's true. Exactly. We've got to question those sources and look for evidence before we believe everything we hear or read.
Good advice.
So speaking of mental shortcuts, another bias that we should all be aware of is the availability heuristic. So we tend to overestimate the likelihood of events that are really easily recalled or imagined.
Okay.
Like, for example, many people are way more afraid of flying than driving, even though car crashes are statistically way more common.
Statistically, yeah, I know that, but I still hate flying.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
because, plane crashes are more vivid and memorable, so they just loom larger in our minds.
Right.
That's thanks to the availability heuristic.
Okay, so our feelings don't necessarily line up with the statistics.
Not always, no. It's the same reason why, people might buy a lottery ticket after hearing about a big winner. Suddenly winning feels much more attainable, even though the odds are still astronomically against you.
Yeah.
It just makes you wonder how many decisions are based on these skewed perceptions of probability.
It really does.
So then there's the representativeness heuristic. This is where we judge something's probability based on how well it just, matches a stereotype.
The stereotype. Okay.
Often ignoring the actual, base rates.
Mm.
And Kahneman illustrates this so brilliantly with what he calls the Linda problem. So he describes this woman, Linda, as outspoken, bright, deeply concerned about social justice. Then he asks, is it more likely that Linda is a bank teller or a bank teller and active in the feminist movement?
I mean, based on that description, I'd probably say a bank teller who's also active in the feminist movement.
Most people would.
Yeah.
But statistically, it's way more likely for someone to just be a bank teller. We get so caught up in how well the description fits our mental image of Linda that we just throw logic out the window.
Wow. So our intuition can be really misleading sometimes.
Sometimes, yeah.
Right.
We crave that good story. Our minds love to fill in those blanks, even if it means ignoring statistical realities.
That's fascinating.
So we're kind of prioritizing a compelling narrative over those cold, hard facts.
Yeah, I can definitely see how that could be a problem. What about the anchoring effect? You mentioned that one earlier too, right?
Yeah, the anchoring effect.
Yeah.
So that's our tendency to be influenced by an initial number, even if it's totally irrelevant. So
Yeah.
imagine if I asked you to estimate Gandhi's age.
Okay.
But first, I ask you, did he live to be older or younger than 140? You'd probably guess a much higher age than someone who wasn't given that initial anchor of 140,
Yeah,
right?
that's true. Yeah, probably. So these random anchors can actually have a big impact on our judgment.
They really can. It's almost as if we're not really in control of our thoughts,
Yeah, it's kind of unsettling.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah.
But recognizing these biases is that crucial first step to kind of mitigating their influence. It's like shining a light on those mental gremlins,
Mm-hmm.
so you can start to understand how they operate.
I like that analogy. Shine a light on those mental gremlins.
You got to see them to defeat them, right?
Right.
So understanding these biases can be really critical when it comes to, the illusion of understanding.
The illusion of understanding. Okay.
Yeah, it's this alluring feeling
Yeah.
that we know more than we actually do.
Oh, yeah. I've definitely fallen for that one before.
I think we all have. So
Yeah.
our minds, they crave coherence, and we love creating those causal stories, even when things are just, random or unpredictable.
Right.
We just desperately want to believe we have a grip on things,
Mhm.
even when we're really just along for the ride.
I can see that.
It's like our brains are wired to find those patterns, even if they're not really there.
Yeah.
And the halo effect definitely feeds into this illusion.
Yeah.
So we tend to judge a person's qualities just based on a single, salient trait.
Oh, interesting.
So if someone is, really attractive,
Yeah.
we might automatically assume they're also intelligent and kind.
Ah, yeah.
We see this with celebrities all the time.
Yes.
Their fame, good looks, it creates this halo that, obscures their flaws, and it makes it harder to see them objectively.
Yeah. I wonder if there are any examples of this from the book.
Oh, yeah. So Kahneman uses the success of Google as an example.
Yeah.
So while skilled decisions definitely played a role, a lot of their success could be attributed to just, luck. And the fact that we only see those events that actually happened, not all the potential alternate paths.
Right, right. We don't see the things that could have happened.
Exactly. So we tend to overestimate the role of skill and underestimate the role of just pure chance.
Interesting. And it makes sense.
Yeah, and this is where the concept of hindsight bias comes into play. So, looking back, it's always easy to connect the dots and create this narrative that makes everything seem inevitable. But in reality, things could have gone in a completely different direction.
It's a good point.
It's a humbling reminder that, we don't always have as much control as we think.
For sure. What about the power of framing? I think you mentioned that earlier too, how the way information is presented can change our choices.
Yes, the power of framing, another powerful concept. So the way information is presented can drastically change our preferences, even if the underlying options are exactly the same.
Really?
Yeah. Take Kahneman's classic, lives saved versus lives lost example.
Okay.
So imagine there's a deadly disease outbreak.
Scary, I know. And you have to choose between two treatment programs.
Okay, 2 treatment programs. Got it.
All right, so Program A guarantees 200 out of 600 people will be saved.
Okay.
Program B has a 33% chance that everyone will be saved and a 67% chance that no one will be saved.
Right.
So which program would you choose?
Oh, man. I think I'd go with Program A. It just feels safer somehow.
Most people would. But both programs have the same statistical outcome.
Really?
Yeah, but Program A is framed in terms of, gains, lives saved,
Yeah.
while Program B is framed in terms of potential losses.
I get
And
it.
it illustrates the power of loss aversion. So that pain of losing something is psychologically way more impactful than the pleasure of gaining the same thing. That's so interesting.
It is.
So I guess understanding how framing shapes our decisions is really important then, isn't it?
It is. Whether we're talking about, marketing or negotiating or even just everyday conversations, recognizing these tactics can help you navigate the world with a more, discerning eye.
Yeah, for sure.
So we've been talking about all these ways our thinking can be influenced, but are there ever times when our gut feelings are actually, spot on?
Oh, absolutely. And Kahneman actually explores this idea of expert intuition, when we can and can't trust our gut.
Okay.
True expertise, it comes from years of experience in a predictable environment with clear feedback. So, think of a firefighter who can just instantly sense which way a fire is going to spread.
Yeah.
Or, a chess master who can just see the board several moves ahead. They've built up this massive mental database of patterns that allow them to make these quick, accurate judgments.
Okay, so their intuition is based on all this knowledge and experience, not just random hunches.
Exactly. But here's the thing. Even experts can get it wrong when they're outside of their area of expertise.
Right. Of course.
So, a brilliant physicist might not be the best person to give you financial advice.
Right. Like that old saying, a jack of all trades is a master of none.
Exactly. And we should be especially wary of anyone who claims they can predict the future, especially in those really complex and unpredictable domains.
Like the stock market or politics.
Exactly. In these situations, Kahneman actually suggests that relying on algorithms and statistical models is better than human judgment.
Really? So like trusting the data over our gut feelings.
Exactly. He calls this taking the outside view.
Taking the outside view. Okay, I like that. What does that involve?
Well, it means kind of stepping back from the specific details of a situation and looking at the bigger picture.
Okay, so instead of getting lost in the weeds, you're looking at the whole forest.
Exactly. You focus on, the base rates and historical data. So let's say, for example, you're thinking about investing in a new tech startup. Instead of just listening to their enthusiastic pitch, you actually do some research. You look at the success rate of similar startups. That helps you make a more objective decision.
So it's a way to counteract our natural tendency to be overconfident.
Yeah, overconfident and put too much faith in our intuition when maybe we shouldn't.
Right. I'm curious, are there any examples of this outside view in the book?
Well, absolutely. One of the most compelling examples is actually Kahneman's own experience working on this curriculum project for the Israeli Ministry of Education. He and his team were extremely optimistic about their progress and their timeline, but then they spoke with someone who had experience with similar projects, and, well, let's just say that conversation was a real eye-opener.
What happened?
This expert, they basically gave Kahneman and his team a dose of reality.
Oh, no.
Yeah, statistically, projects like theirs had a 40% chance of failing. And even the ones that did succeed took an average of, 7 to 10 years to complete.
Wow, that's a far cry from their initial projections.
Right. They had totally ignored the base rates, and they had fallen victim to what he calls the planning fallacy.
The planning fallacy.
Yeah, it's that tendency to be overly optimistic about our own plans. We all do it.
So they got this reality check, and what do they do?
Well, what's fascinating is that even after hearing all this statistical evidence, they still went ahead with the project.
Really?
It's a perfect example of how our emotional investment in a project can blind us to the hard data, even when it's right there in front of us.
So are we just doomed to be slaves to our emotions and biases?
Not at all. Awareness is key, like we were saying before. Just knowing about these tendencies can make a huge difference.
So it's not about eliminating these biases altogether.
No, not at all. It's more about learning to manage them.
Right, so if you're about to make a big purchase, take a step back.
Exactly. Ask yourself, am I really thinking this through, or am I just caught up in the excitement of the moment?
Or if you're feeling super confident about a decision, double check. You're not letting the illusion of understanding lead you astray.
And remember, nobody is immune to these biases, not even the experts.
Right, which is why it's so important to be humble and question our assumptions.
And seek out diverse perspectives. That's one of the, the great things about conversations like this.
Yeah. We learn from each other and challenge those blind spots.
Exactly.
So the key is to keep learning, keep questioning, keep those brains engaged.
Absolutely. And speaking of keeping those brains engaged, I think it's time we move on to another fascinating aspect of Kahneman's work.
Okay, I'm ready.
He introduces this concept of the experiencing self and the remembering self.
Two different selves. What does that even mean?
Well, think of it this way. Imagine you're at a concert, completely lost in the music, feeling the energy of the crowd. That's your experiencing self in its element, fully immersed in the present moment.
Okay, I can picture that.
But then, when the concert's over and you're telling your friend about it, you probably focus on certain highlights, like that amazing guitar solo.
Right. Or when the singer came out into the crowd.
Exactly. That's your remembering self taking over, creating this narrative based on the peaks and the end of the experience.
So our memories are like edited highlights.
In a way, yes. They're not always a completely accurate representation of the entire experience. And this difference between the experiencing self and the remembering self can really affect how we make decisions.
Interesting. How so?
Well, let's say you're planning a vacation. You spend hours looking at brochures, creating this perfect itinerary, imagining all the amazing things you'll do. But how much of that imagined happiness is based on the experiencing self versus the remembering self?
That's a good question. I'm not sure.
It's something to think about. And we often fall into what Kahneman calls the focusing illusion. That's where we overestimate how much certain events will affect our happiness.
Okay, so like when you're daydreaming about that dream job, but then the reality is, daily commutes, office politics, all that stuff.
Exactly. Those are the things the experiencing self has to deal with. So how do we balance these two selves? How do we make choices that lead to lasting happiness?
I don't know. What does Kahneman say?
Well, his work suggests that we need to pay more attention to the experiencing self, the one that's living in the here and now.
So be more mindful. Be present.
Exactly. Savor the present moment and appreciate the little things instead of getting caught up in future fantasies or past narratives.
So happiness isn't a destination, it's a journey.
Well said. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more to explore in thinking, fast and slow.
It's like he's given us this new lens to view the world through, one that shows us all those hidden biases we never knew we had.
And now that we're aware of them, we can navigate the world with more understanding, make better decisions, build better relationships, just live better lives.
It's about harnessing the power of our minds.
And recognizing their limitations.
Well said. This has been a fascinating conversation.
It has.
I'm excited to see where we go next with it.
Me too. Let's dive even deeper into thinking fast and slow after a quick break. Stay tuned.
So before the break, we were talking about those two selves, the experiencing self and the remembering self.
Yeah, the two entities that kind of influence how we see happiness.
Right, and we were just about to get into how those two selves can sometimes clash.
Yeah, let's get into that.
So imagine you're at a concert, right? You're lost in the music, you feel the energy of the crowd, you're loving every minute of it.
Okay.
That's your experiencing self, just totally immersed in the moment.
Living it up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But then when the concert's over and you're telling your friend about it, you probably just focus on a few key moments.
Yeah.
Like that awesome guitar solo.
Yeah, or the light show or something. Yeah.
Exactly. That's your remembering self stepping in, building the story, focusing on the high points and how it all ended. So it's like our memories are like just the highlight reel.
Yeah, in a way. Not always the full picture. And this difference between those two selves, it can really affect our decisions.
Ah, interesting. How so?
Well, think about planning a vacation. You spend hours looking at pictures, making the perfect itinerary, imagining all the amazing things you'll do.
Yeah.
But how much of that happiness you're picturing is coming from the experiencing self actually being there versus the remembering self looking back on it?
Good question. I'm not sure.
Right. And we often fall for this thing Kahneman calls the focusing illusion. That's where we like overestimate how much something will affect our happiness because we're so focused on it right then.
Okay, so like when you're dreaming about a new car.
Exactly. You imagine yourself cruising around feeling great, but you're
Yeah.
forgetting about the traffic jams, the parking hassles, all that stuff.
Right, right. Or that new job you think will be amazing,
Mm.
but then there's the commute and the office drama.
Exactly. Stuff the experiencing self has to actually deal with.
So how do we like balance these two selves? How do we make choices that will actually make us happy in the long run?
Well, Kahneman says we need to listen to that experiencing self more, the one living in the now.
So be more present, be mindful.
Exactly. Savor each moment. Enjoy the little things, instead of getting caught up in daydreams or dwelling on the past.
So happiness isn't about reaching some goal, it's more like the whole journey.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And this is just like a taste of what Kahneman talks about. There's so much more to discover in his book.
It's like he's given us this whole new way of seeing the world and ourselves.
Right, like we never realized all these biases were affecting us.
But now that we do know, well, hopefully we can make smarter choices, build better relationships.
Live better lives overall.
It's all about like using the power of our minds, but also recognizing their limits.
Exactly. And knowing that even though our thinking can be messy, it's still incredibly powerful.
Well said. This has been an amazing conversation.
It has. And to keep this momentum going, let's delve even further into thinking fast and slow after we hear from our sponsors. Stay with us.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We're wrapping up our exploration of Daniel Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow. What a journey it's been.
We've uncovered so many fascinating things about how our minds work, those tricky biases, those two selves inside us.
It's like made me realize we're not always as logical as we think.
Yeah, that's a big takeaway from Kahneman. We're constantly being influenced by things we don't even realize.
But the good news is, just knowing about these biases is a big step.
Absolutely. Awareness is key. Once you understand those mental shortcuts, you can start to catch yourself and make more deliberate choices.
Like having a cheat sheet for your own brain.
Exactly. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a thought.
Okay, what is it?
Now that you've gotten a taste of these two thinking systems, those biases, how can you start paying more attention to your own thought processes?
That's a big question. Like Kahneman's given us a mirror to look at our own minds.
Yeah, and it's a process. Knowing about these biases doesn't make us immune.
Right, we're all human. We're all going to make mistakes.
But by understanding them, we can hopefully make better choices for ourselves, for the world.
Well said. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Thinking Fast and Slow.
It's been great exploring these ideas with you.
If you want to learn more, definitely pick up Kahneman's book. It's amazing.
And keep those minds working. The more we learn about how we think, the better we can navigate, well, everything.
Until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, keep diving deep. Welcome back to the Deep Dive. So we're wrapping up our exploration of Daniel Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow. And wow, it's been quite a journey.
It really has. We've uncovered some pretty amazing insights into, how our minds work, all those biases, those two selves.
Yeah, it's made me realize that, well, we're not always as rational as we like to think we are.
That's for sure. One of the big takeaways from Kahneman is that, we're constantly being influenced by forces we don't even see.
It's kind of unsettling when you think about it.
It is, but the good news is even just knowing about these biases is a step in the right direction.
Right, awareness is key, like we've been saying.
Exactly. Once you see those mental shortcuts, those patterns, you can start to anticipate them, make more conscious choices.
It's like having, a cheat sheet for your own brain.
I like that. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with something to think about.
All right, I'm listening.
Now that you've gotten this glimpse into, those two thinking systems, the biases, how can you start being more aware of your own thought process? Really pay attention to how your mind works.
That's a good question. It's like Kahneman's given us this mirror to really examine ourselves.
And remember, this is an ongoing thing. It's not like we suddenly become immune to these biases just because we know about them.
Of course not. We're all human. We all make mistakes.
But understanding those biases, understanding those patterns can help us hopefully make better choices for ourselves and, well, for everyone, really.
Well said. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into thinking fast and slow.
It's been a pleasure exploring these ideas with you.
And for our listeners, if you're intrigued, I highly recommend picking up Kahneman's book. It's a game changer.
It really is. And keep those minds active. Keep learning. The more we understand how we think, the better equipped we are to, well, to navigate life.
Couldn't agree more. That's it for this deep dive. Until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, keep diving deep.